Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Billy Bob's Space Trucker, and is part of a series. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 30. The war had been going in favor of America so far. Despite being vastly outnumbered, their natural fighting ability and control of FTL gates in near systems made sure they had a significant edge in logistics. That did not mean the war was going great, however. Well, they were able to fight well above their weight, and for every soldier or ship they lost, they'd take out 10 Xeno equivalents. They were still fighting the rest of the known galaxy, more or less. The Council founders would suffer for it, but they could afford to lose even more than that and still start grinding the American forces down. Even so, the Americans didn't go down lightly. As demonstrated by a recent battle of HF-432, it likely wouldn't be written about in the history books. HF-432 was a dead system that didn't seem to have any importance aside from minor FTL junction. An American scout ship had been ambushed by a Xeno destroyer that was more than twice as big. Long story short, both ships were drifting dead in space, but that didn't mean both ships were entirely dead. "Anyone still alive?" Corporal Jones was asking as he looked around the engine room. The bridge had been hit hard, but Jones and 2 other Marines had survived in their pressure suits. The scout ship had only had a crew of 10, and 5 of that had been Marines. There was movement as they saw someone wave from the back of the engine. Jones moved around the damaged and vented engine room to see a figure in a pressure suit working on the engine. His suit had several patches on it, and even duct tape in one spot. Overall, it was stained and damaged, but his tool belt looked secure. "The feck are you doing? The ship is dead," Jones asked as he saw the person working. "And as an engineer, it's my job to scuttle it," came the reply. "Oh, Steve, right? Yeah, the name's Steve. If Xenos want to try and steal our nav data, they'll turn this on to get the power going, and if everything goes right, it'll explode in their faces. Wait. We need to call out of here for help. They blew our comms up first. I already corrupted the navcom just in case, but either way, the Xenos will find us before our own." "Crap," the Marine growled, thinking about how to break this to the others. As he thought it over, he looked through the hole in the side of the ship and saw the Xeno cruiser drifting across from them. "Hey, what about their ship?" The engineer looked up. Fucked if I know. I've never worked on a Xeno ship before." "Whatever. An engine is an engine, right?" No, not even close. Do you have any better ideas, Steve?" The engineer sighed and finished tinkering with the engine before shrugging. "Vic, I guess it's that or wait to die in space. Get the others." Jones nodded and retrieved the other 2 Marines who had been trying to salvage the bridge, to no avail. Howie and Tina met up with Jones and Steve in the engine room as they climbed through the hole to stand on the outside of the dead ship. "What makes you think that we can turn it back on?" Tina asked. "We've got no idea if I could even start it up if we're not wrecked in battle," Steve replied, clearly full of optimistic confidence. "But it's dying here for sure, or maybe dying over there. Only got so much oxygen left." "Thanks, Steve," Jones muttered. Tina and Howie jumped free, boosting towards the craft. But before Jones could, Steve stopped him. "Hey, I'm in an engineering suit. You're the ones with the marine pressure suits. You gotta carry me." "Oh, sorry, nearly forgot." The Marine gripped the engineer under his arms, boosting across the void towards the destroyer, the dead planet of a system far away to their side. The 4 humans entered the Xeno ship the same way they left their own, through a hole in the side of it. They were on the bridge, which had been smashed up pretty bad in the attack. Steve couldn't fit into any of the small chairs, so he leaned over a seat, typing on a console. "There's some power left, I think. I got no idea how to transfer it from up here. We need to get into engineering." The engineer led the Marines deeper into the Xeno ship. They were passing floating bodies of the Phyllis. Most people called them fleckos because they looked like geckos mixed with flies. He didn't like the look of the dark interior as the headlamps swept over the corridors. On top of being full of dead bodies, the shape was all wrong. Finally, they found the path to engineering, a massive blast door sealed in front of them. Steve tapped the panel, which hissed at him and flashed red. I'm guessing that means it's locked, or I sealed against the pressure of vacuum. He looked around then and pointed to another pressure door they could seal behind them. There wasn't any power to it, but there was a manual override. The problem was the bolt seemed to be missing a lever or a handle to turn it with. Maybe you need to solve a physics puzzle to find the last piece you need, Howie said. And maybe you're an idiot, the engineer muttered as the Marines laughed. Instead of going searching, he just pulled a wrench from his tool belt and fastened it into place. I don't think these guys ever figured out a single person could do something like this. He began to turn the wrench, slowly lowering the blast doors into place as the machinery creaked and groaned. Why wouldn't they just leave something in place to lower this? Tina had asked as the engineer slowly lowered it. "'Cause they're wussies," the engineer grunted out as he kept turning it. Finally, the blast door was sealed and he detached the wrench. "I'm fairly sure none of them have the strength to operate this on their own. Probably got a robot to do it or something." They turned back to the engine room and Steve stepped up, tapping on the control panel once more. This time it beeped at him and there was a hiss as the door opened, oxygen rushing in to fill the makeshift airlock. As the door slid up, they saw the light inside and were met with the surprised faces of what had to be 20 flaccos. They had swords and some sort of energy torch, and a number of nasty-looking melee weapons. The Marines braced when a shining light came down and they started to dance. It was some sort of high-pitched Xeno music as they broke into a team dance choreography of some kind. "What do we do?" Howie asked nervously. "We're totally getting served." "Are you fucking kidding me?" Steve asked and pulled an old worn 1911 from his tool belt, shooting one flacco through the head, immediately breaking their rhythm. "Fucking shoot them!" "Oh, yeah," Jones muttered, as if the thought hadn't occurred to him. The Marines raised their guns and started firing. 3 Marines and an injured engineer against 20 elite flaccos. It was a massacre. Dancing and melee weapons did not hold up against automatic weapons and a 45. They weren't even fast enough to make the Marines need to lead them. Once they were dead, greenish-blue slanted across the walls and machinery, the Marines checked their weapons while Steve moved forward, pulling bodies off the consoles he needed to check. "You can get this up and running, right, Steve?" Tina was asking as she watched him work. "No idea. Just trying to figure out where they have the readings." "Yeah, but it's an engine, and you're an engineer. Why the hell does everybody assume that I can fix any kind of engine? Besides, even if I get this turned on, I'm not a pilot." "What? You can't fly this thing? I thought engineers knew how to do that stuff," Jones said. "You're the Marines. You know how to hotwire tanks and fly assault craft, right?" No. "We were never trained to do that. Then why does everyone assume that I'd be trained to do other shite? You wouldn't ask an OBGYN to help with an oncologist, would you?" They simply stared at him and he shook his head. "Never mind." "It's all like energy and power and electrical stuff, though, right? Didn't you go to college?" Jones was asking. "To a party college. It was all booze and co-eds and a haze for 4 years. Regardless, I'm an engineer on human systems, and specifically ship engines. This is xeno-engineering. You expect me to just come in here and take a look at this panel and... He was looking at the panel and tapped a few buttons. There was a hum through the ship as they felt it shift. "I got some impulse power. Then has some sort of emergency system to take us to a nearby station." Jones opened his mouth, but Steve pointed at him. "Not a fucking word. You guys got lucky this time." They sat around, shooting the shit, waiting for about 2 hours until they heard a gentle thump throughout the ship, and the engines began to spin down. Looking around, they gathered their weapons and waited for the door to slowly grind back open. They were staring at a bunch of space ants and something they hadn't seen before. "It's like a part orc, part bear, or an ore," Tina muttered. "No, you idiot. Clearly you would call it a bork," Steve said firmly. "Who are you?" the bork questioned before saying, "I am he who has survived the dread creature Mittens, red-furred devil of death. I've been tasked by the greatest human alive to guard the station. None shall harm it again." "Oh, no," Steve muttered. "What?" Jones asked. "This idiot means Mitten, my brother's cat." "Your brother is the greatest human alive?" The engineer let out a heavy sigh, slumping a little where he stood. My real name isn't just Steve, it's, Stevie Ray, little brother of Billy Bob Space Trucker. Billy Bob felt dirty. He hadn't really been doing anything wrong, but somehow looking up xenophysiology made him feel dirtier than looking at porn. Porn was totally normal, just an everyday part of life. But when you had to start reading stuff that was all scientific and clinical, he much preferred the way his parents had given him the talk when he was younger. Straightforward, no BS, just the facts he needed to know. The rumors he wanted to know, and a bunch of stuff he didn't know was physically possible. Sure, there was a lot to take in as a junior high kid, but at least they'd sorted out human sex for him before high school, and that Xeno sex ed class with Mrs. Munchausen. High school was too young for people to be introduced to the idea of sex with Xenos. Then again, maybe he wouldn't have been so worried about the stuff with Emily if he'd been properly prepared. It was hard to keep track of his beliefs when life kept making him question the ones he had. It was a lot easier to keep on trucking when he was just trucking. Now that he'd become some sort of figure for an intergalactic war, crap had gotten complicated. And that didn't even cover what he'd learned about Libertonians. So long as he could keep her gloves on, he should be able to survive the night. But her beak... His research had mentioned a bunch of biting. He was on the bridge of the Rosie. He'd gotten it fired up and heading out into the FTL lanes to get closer to the final destination. Well, not the final if everything went right. Either way, he was alone trying to figure out the logistics to a problem he'd never expected to have. It was a crucial midterm project named How to Get Some and Not Die, and he wasn't sure how long he had before the teacher demanded he turn over his work and hope for the best. He had plenty to worry about, without even considering the fact that his translator had struggled with a few terms that he had to pray to God and Washington and even Andrew Jackson that he'd read correctly. He wasn't sure if he was excited or terrified or... Much more likely he was just giving him a fear boner since it was a challenge that could kill him and also involved getting laid. It was one of the truest challenges any American could ever attempt. He'd already joined the Void Club thanks to an extra-large pressure suit and a flexible woman back in community college. It had been rather uncomfortable and awkward, but damn if doing it while Earth hung above them wasn't an interesting experience. Of course, that was when he was younger and stupider. Well, maybe stupider was relative, because that was when his biggest worries were community college classes, and not getting too shit-faced over the weekend to miss out on his part-time job. The main issue was his boss was his dad, who, at the slightest hint of a hangover, would go into his how do you sell a chicken to a deaf guy routine, which was loud. So loud. Billy Bob was deep in thought about how to proceed when he heard someone walking up the steps to the bridge. He quickly typed on the console, closing out of the extranet windows, and doing a quick check to see if anything had sound going that he might have missed. Once he was satisfied everything was off, he turned the screens back over to the navcomp and internal systems that he was actually supposed to be looking at. "Hey, Billy Bob, all up here on your lonesome," Emily said, as he leaned back and smiled at her. She leaned in to rub her cheek against his for a moment and glanced at his consoles. "Wow, we're already that far along. Have you been flying through the whole sleep cycle?" "Hey, it's a big fat ship, but that doesn't mean it's slow," he smiled at her, and rubbed a hand along his side. "The space hamsters should be waking up soon. Then I guess we should talk about their, what do they call their leader? A Khan." Billy Bob arched his brows at that. "A what?" "Those fuzzy fat little hamsters. There's got to be something wrong with the translator. Hold on." He scrolled through his translator to figure out what was going on. He called them space hamsters. A group of hamsters was called a horde. Oh. His translator figured the leader of a horde should be a Khan. Well, time to change that. A little more custom input and... Okay. "Tell me again." "The fluffiest big shot fancy pants." "Excellent," Billy Bob said with a wide grin, as Emily wondered just what he'd done. She knew he was up to something. So far, it seemed like he was going to have to learn how to settle in and relax and share piloting the ship with the hamsters. Since when they woke up, he knew they'd offer to help him fly the Rosie. He should really spend more time with Emily and talk with their fanciest pants to figure out what the plan was for ruining the galactic government. "You know," Emily slowly slipped around his seat, sliding into his lap. Once more, he was a little surprised at her weight compared to her height. He knew that he should expect it, but it was hard to retrain a brain to relative weights after a lifetime of heavy gravity. "We're all alone." She rubbed a hand along his jaw as he blinked. He wasn't ready for this. "Mr. Biddybob, sir," he heard a voice squeak up from the stairs. "Thank God." "Coming!" He picked Emily up. "Sorry, looks like we're out of time." She huffed as he set her to the side and walked down towards the approaching horde of hamsters. "Come on up, you're the new bridge crew." There was about 8 of them, which for Xenos was a skeleton crew to do what he was doing on his own. "Yes, Mr. Biddybob, can you throw us around, please?" "Sorry, but not until after your shift is done." They all let out a collective groan. "Sorry, but it tires you little fellas out too much. Can't have you dozing off on the job, can we?" He rubbed their heads as he walked past, followed by Emily, as he looked for their fluffiest big-shot fancy pants. It took him a bit of time to discover all the rest of the space hamsters were in the mess. He saw the big top hat for Mr. Monopoly and shouted out, "Ah, there you are, my good hamster," which seemed to startle the figure who hadn't been facing him. The Xeno diplomat grabbed all the food on his plate and shoved it into his mouth before turning around to look at Biddybob, his cheeks nearly exploding with food, contrasting with the much too posh clothes that he was wearing. "That is adorable," Emily whispered next to him. "I know. How has humanity not met these guys before?" "Seriously, Biddybob, aren't they so cute? They override all my predatory instincts to kill and eat them." Biddybob arched a brow at that and looked over at his girlfriend. Then he looked a bit more concerned when he saw the mix of hunger and amusement on her face. "Whoa, whoa. You don't eat sentient beings, right?" "Oh, no. It's just, they do resemble the prey species back home." "Keep it together, Emily." "Right. Sorry." "Sheesh. Thinking about eating our guests. Humans would never do something that creepy. Well, Americans wouldn't at any rate. Well, moving on." Mr. Monopoly had been working to swallow down the giant mouthful of food that he had, and they had to wait a few minutes before he could finally cough out. Apologies. You startled me, and my instinct was to eat a hearty last meal." The posh upper-class British accent made Biddybob smile. "That's just fine, Mr. Monopoly." "I say, what does that name mean anyway?" "Oh, you just resemble a very wealthy and affluent human, known for having only the fanciest of pants around." "Oh, well, what a remarkable fellow. Is he a living human?" No. He's long gone, I'm afraid." "Well, it can't be helped. I'm sure I'll find reading about his life most enjoyable. I do enjoy having the fanciest pants around, you know. Once I've even paid a fellow for his fancy pants and took them on the spot." Yes, sir. They're right up there with a nice pot of humbush and a few wicker nibbles to dunk at it." Biddybob slowly shook his head as he watched the space hamster talk. Was this real? Was this some sort of joke the Brits were playing on him right now? They were possibly still mad about that time their first space colony was raided on the 4th of July, as the Americans stole all the tea and then threw it into the planet Star. Or maybe it was at the time the Queen was taking a tour of the UHG colonies, and an American had rigged their sound system to play Stars and Stripes forever, instead of God Save the Queen, on every planet. But no, this couldn't be a joke that they'd set up, not in the middle of war, right? They did have some dry humor. He'd keep his eyes open. No lie, he was going to prank Biddybob. Right, fancy pants aside. We're hoping to discuss the plan for getting us into the big council gathering." "Oh, yes, of course, most delightful indeed. Yes, splendid, in fact." They looked at him, and he looked back. "Well, I say, dear fellows, what's the plan?" "What? We wanted to know what your plan was," Emily said. "Oh, right. Yes, of course. That would make more sense, I suppose. We just need to talk to my chief sneaky busybody." Biddybob checked his translator. That was a direct translation as far as he could tell. He hadn't changed another custom input. These were the words they used, and his translator tried to tell him their leader was a Khan. If ever a computer could be more wrong. "Well, where is he?" "If I knew where he was, he wouldn't be my chief sneaky busybody, now would he?" "Of course not." Biddybob was about to ask how they could find the space hamster when the PA came on. Mr. Billy Bob, please report to the bridge." He looked up at the ceiling and yelled out, "What is it?" Is this line private?" "Yeah, sure, why not?" "There are pirates." The rest of the hamsters around him squealed out in fright and began to shovel food into the mouths. "Jesus Christ, you guys don't fucking choke. I'll be right there." He grumbled and quickly ran back to the bridge. The Rosie had come out into a system where they'd jumped out the FTL lane to go refuel. A small ship was out in the viewport as he saw the bridge crew shivering. "What kind of ship is that?" "It's a Bork raiding vessel. They must have at least 30 Borks on board." Billy Bob sighed and walked over to the comm screen. He brought up a channel with the ship. "Good. This is the Space Hamster, Captain. Come to surrender." "No, this is Billy Bob Colonel of the United States Space Force. I am ordering you to fuck off right now, before I come over there and kill you stupid fucks for delaying my ship." What?" The Bork was obviously surprised with the voice and tone of the person he was talking to. "You can't talk to me like that. I'm the Yeah, I don't care. You've got what, 35, 40 of you over there? I've cleared an entire station on my own, and now I have a Libertonian girlfriend in a power suit. So, are you feeling today's your lucky day, punk?" He cursed after he said that. "Wait, no, hold on. I've got something better." He paused for a moment, trying to think up something. But he was waiting too long, so quickly he just went off. "Why don't you bend over and feck your own face?" He yelled into the mic. "What? That's not we. This must be a trick. That ship has Space Hamster registration." "Yeah, and I took over the ship and enslaved them. You know how it is. The weak prey on the strong, and I am the strongest there is. Do you want me to come over there and show you?" "Huh? What species are you again?" "Human. American subspecies." He could hear muttering in the background. The species engaged in war with the Council, right up?" "Yes, that's me. I mean us." There was a muttering, and then a different voice came on. "Are you the wielder of the beast mittens?" "You heard of him, did you?" "The 10-foot-tall, 6-legged predator with 3-inch claws? Of course we have. You just go about your day then. We're very, very, very sorry to have bothered you." "Yes, we're very sorry. Please, you'll just go about our day." Hey, you spread word through the other box. Only raid the space poodles, arseways, crabs, and fish cops. Leave the space hamsters alone, or we'll come after you once we're done with the council." Oh yes, of course. We'll spread word right away." The ship turned and started to make haste away from the Rosie. Billy Bob grinned as the crew stared at him. "Are we your slaves now?" "What? No, I made that up. You're all free people. Shit. Great Abe's ghost would strangle me on the spot if I enslaved you funny little furballs. No." They cheered at that, and then one opened the PA. "Mr. Billy Bob saved us all, and he ended piracy against space hamsters everywhere." He could hear cheering across the ship and stood with his hands on his hips, the biggest, stupidest grin on his face. Somewhere we knew an American flag was flying patriotically in the wind. Feck, it felt good to liberate people. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob, Space Trucker. I would like to thank our T5 members and patrons, Casper Arnholtz, Jon Creighton, Vidmori, 050, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.